how you felt like at the time for bigger women, there wasn't as many opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about like some of those struggles that you did actually face where perhaps you didn't maybe land a role for that reason, which seems insane to me, but yeah, I find that quite interesting if you can touch a little bit upon that.
Well, it's something that still continues to happen. It's not as rampant, but when I first got to New York, there might have been one plus size role, either male or woman, because at the time they were only doing the binary. You know, now they've actually opened up that somewhat where there's non-binary and transgender and amazing roles like that. But still somewhat to this day, there's generally like one big person plus size role on Broadway at a time. In a season that has, I don't know, 45 shows in it. So one role in one show out of 45 shows. You know what I mean? Yeah. So all of us big people got to be really friendly because we were always at the same auditions together. And what's fun is that as a character actor, right? That's what I consider myself to be, a character actor. We generally don't look like any other character actor, right? We're all completely individual, which is amazing, but also can work against you. Because then you're like, well, I am this thing. And they want that thing, but I know the person that does that thing, so let me give you their number. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it is difficult. It's always a thing. You go into an audition, and because of your size, and this still happens, people assume that you're lazy, or people assume that you're not talented because of your size, because how does talent exist in a big person? Which is absurd. It's completely absurd, but it is a preconceived notion that a lot of people have about people that are of size, that because you're fat or whatever, which that word doesn't bother me. I know it does bother some people, but because you're fat, you can't possibly contain talent. And I don't know if you're allowed to cuss, but that's bullshit. You know what I mean?
You can absolutely say that.
Okay, great. So it's total bullshit. And it's sort of like getting past the preconceived notions of people that see... They only want like the leggy blonde, you know, who's 6 feet tall, who's a girl. It's like, how does that exist in the world? I don't think that's fair. But you know what I mean? It happens every show and every audition. It is less now, but it's one of those things where you know going in that you already have a mountain to climb that nobody else does. You have to climb this whole rocky mountain range just to get to the baseline of where everybody else starts. And in one way, I think that it's very useful. It obviously is soul crushingly hard, but it gives you a fortitude that not everybody has, right? So the rejections you face in the business, which everyone faces, it doesn't matter what level you're at. You can be lowest ensemble member to multi-million-dollar Hollywood star. Everybody faces rejection continuously. Those rejections sort of start early, right? As a big girl, it started early for me, and it stayed my whole life and continues to stay. But you build up a skin a bit, you know what I mean? A thick skin of like, okay, and you have to learn to move on from it. It's the hardest thing, still somewhat, that you look back and go, man, yeah, it came down between me and that other person.
Yeah.
And maybe, and you don't always know the reason why, but maybe that's the reason that they got it. But I don't focus on why I don't get things anymore. Maybe that's age and experience. It just turns out that it was them, right? So it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for them, good for them. They get the job. I'll get a different job that I'm really right for. Even in Orange is the New Black, you mentioned Orange is the New Black, which is literally the biggest TV thing I've ever done. I was on it for 2 seasons, the season 6 and 7, the final 2. And it actually changed my perception of being a big person, because they had seen me when I did my Broadway show, The Last Ship, which was written by Sting, the rock icon. They had seen me, and it was 4 years of auditions for them for Orange is the New Black before I booked anything on there. But they had seen me on Broadway, and they kept calling me in over and over again for 4 years, just off and on every few months or so, because they saw something in me that they wanted on their show. Because that show was really a groundbreaker for diversity, for representation on all kinds of levels, including size. And they knew that they wanted me in there somehow, but it wasn't right until it was. And then I booked the show. And when I showed up for my costume fitting, I brought all the undergarments that I always have to wear when I'm on stage in a show, right? That keep you tucked in, that make sure you don't jiggle, especially as a big person. You know, the undergarments that are not fun to wear, but you always have to. So I brought them with me because I imagined they wouldn't have them. And I have been taught that, right? God forbid you be you. Let's make you thinner, even if you're not. You know what I mean? Don't jiggle. And so I brought them out. I was like, I brought all these. Do you want me to put them on? And the head wardrobe designer and costume designer, she's like, those look really comfortable. How about we just tailor everything to you so you look good and you feel good?
Wow.
And it blew my mind because I didn't realize that that was an option. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's make me look good and feel good at the same time without trying to morph me into something that the world would see as more acceptable. And it changed everything literally in that moment. Now I don't allow that crap to happen anymore.
Yeah.
Wow,
I don't allow them to be like, let's put you. I'm like,
so
Yeah.
that show,
What was that show?
even behind the scenes, was groundbreaking.
completely. And they were so supportive. It was female driven. Gingy, and I can't think of her last name because I'm a horrible person, but Gingy is the one that created it. She was the showrunner and she created it and she wrote on it. They had a group of writers and everything, but that would rotate per episode. But it was so incredible to be on the set, just to be there with all of the actors and actresses and performers and the creatives. It was so supportive, and it was the first TV thing I'd ever done. And I ended up being the first person they shot for the first scene for the first day of season 6. So it was like being shot out of a cannon.
Yeah.
I had never done like on camera classes. I had always loved TV and film, and I'm a avid, rabid, and like consumer of like, not content because I hate that word, but like art that is TV and that is film, because I think it's all art. And it teaches us lessons and shows us amazing things. And so I'd always been a fan of actors. I would go on like binges of like, I want to watch everything that this actor has done for their entire career, to watch the progression. So it's all research to me. But luckily I'd had a friend who was a director of mine and not on the show, but otherwise in theater. And I asked her for some advice, and she wrote me the best letter. And like just breaking it all down and just explaining it to me in the most concise terms and the most generous terms. And I still have that letter, and I pass it on to other people sometimes just because I'm like, this is the best advice. Make friends with a cameraman. You know what I mean? Like, it was the first thing. But yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah, but the show was groundbreaking both on screen and behind the scenes.
Do you remember? You said you were the first person in the first scene of that season. Do you remember what that scene was?
Yeah. So I know exactly what it was. It's actually, I think, is how season 6 opens.
Oh, it literally is the first scene of the series.
Which is random because they don't normally shoot in order.
Yeah.
So it just happened to be that, you know what I mean? And I don't know if it actually was the first scene or if it was like one of the very first in the episode, but it helped introduce the new prison. And it was me standing on one foot, balancing on one foot, because I'd read something about it. And so I had to do take after take after take of me balancing on one foot. Luckily, I was good at it. They actually were like, can you be worse at it? I was like, yeah, sure. I had too good a balance. So they wanted me to flop a little. I was like, sorry, I took dance classes a very long time, so I have really good balance. They were like, be worse. I was like, great. I will lower my expectations of my balance right now.
I mean, Ginger seems to be like such a fun character to play, right?
Oh, God. She was so good. She was so good.
Yeah.
So what happens is they write the first like few episodes, 4 episodes generally, and then they cast the show. And then once they cast the people, they write for the people that they have cast. I don't know that Ginger originally, and spoiler alert ahead for those who have not watched the last few seasons of Orange is the New Black, which happened like, almost 10 years ago. But the storyline with the fantasy inmate, I don't think existed until after they had cast me, because for that show I was cast as a recurring role. And so what that means is I didn't know if I would be in the next episode until like a day or two before it started shooting. But I figured that if I could shoot 1 or 2 days per episode, which would take 2 weeks an episode, I could make all of my bills for the month. So all I had to do was be on the set like 1 or 2 days per episode, and I was set. And what ended up happening is I ended up being in every single episode of season 6. There was an episode, I had 7 episodes that we'd filmed, and all of a sudden we got to episode 8 and I wasn't in it. And I was like, my streak is broken. What a bummer. And then I was like, oh, well, it was fun while it lasted. And then I get a phone call from my agent like the next day going like, hey, are you actually available tomorrow? And I was like, for what? They're like, they've added a scene and you're in it. Can you film it? I was like, yes, I can.
Yes.
And I think I had like a line or 2 lines, whatever. But I walked in on that set. I was like, yay, my streak is intact. See, episode 8, yay. And I was at Crafty, which is the table where they have all the fun food and snacks. Like you can have anything you want, basically. And I was getting, I don't know, a Sprite and I don't know, granola bar or whatever was fancy for the time. No, it wasn't fancy. It was just fun. But Hillary, the writer for that episode, walks up. She's like, oh, hey, I'm glad you're here. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I'm here. She's like, yeah, we were writing the show and we were going through and we're like, there's something missing. What's missing in the writer's room? And I was like, oh, wow, crazy. She's like, yeah, we realized it was you. We were missing you. And so we wrote you in. And I was like, that's awesome.